Hello friends, welcome back to the show. Today in the studio, I was joined by Danny Miranda, a fellow podcaster who's had interviews with some of the biggest and brightest names in health, fitness, entrepreneurship, you name it. Danny is a fun and energetic and very passionate human being who's built his brand and his life around being curious and asking high value questions. And luckily for him today, I got to put him in the hot seat and ask some high value questions about what it's like to pursue your dreams, why 75 Hard was so transformational to him, what it was like to interview the likes of Alex Hormozi and Andrew Frisella, why people are drawn to Austin, Texas as this cultural melting pot for entrepreneurship and health and mindset, and what it's really like to transition his gifts into coaching and leading retreats. I think you're going to get a lot of this one. It was a good heart-to-heart conversation about growth, the challenges of growth, and really going after what you want the most in life. So without further ado, Mr. Danny Miranda. Danny Miranda, welcome to the show. Another podcast pro in the studio today. So I've been looking to you for some inspiration for quite some time, and something that I've been very inspired by is something you're moving away from, I think. So we'll get to that. But first, it's really inspiring for people who want to be curious, diligent about their research. So I was like, how can I Danny Miranda? So I tried to start reaching out to people and, scrubbing through the archives and such. And I found some cool things like how in 2020 you applied to the position at James Clear's podcast host and you kind of got ghosted. And then I got to get more personal. So I reached out to our mutual friends, Harry and Brett. And Harry was like, man, such a fascinating person to talk to, but the coolest thing I ever seen him do was eat the biggest steak I've ever seen in about 2 minutes flat. So that's what I got from Harry. And that's how we're going to kick off this show. Apparently you can take down a T-bone like nobody's business.
Yeah, that's true. Harry's one of my favorite people, and I love steak so much, and I eat it way too fast. The gene that I got from my dad, and I love steak so much.
Yeah, well, you are in good company here, man, because we all love a bit of steak. So I want you to take us on a little bit of a journey and kind of like reverse engineer a little bit. I'll set it up. You have a podcast here in Austin. You've grown that. You've done, some amazing guests, lots of interviews with some really big names, some really cool bucket list guests for some people, names like Hormozi and Frisella of 75 Hard and such. How did you stumble into podcasting?
Yeah, so for me, it was so organic in the sense of I started to put on Twitter, who wants to talk on the phone? And this was in maybe June of 2020. And maybe in that month, June 2020, I had 20 conversations with people that were so enriching for me and the other person that I said, I got to record these because somewhere, someone out there might enjoy this conversation as well. And I just started doing episodes. And by doing episodes, I mean, I got Skype open, I pressed record, no cameras, and I just talked to a friend. And they were such amazing conversations that I said, okay, I'm just going to keep doing this and keep doing this. And immediately, it was like love at first sight. I did 3 episodes a week starting in year 1. And I think I had 20 episodes recorded in the first 30 days.
Wow.
Now these are audio only conversations, but it's like, wow, no one can stop me but me. And that realization and that idea just lit something under me. And I got so excited by it. I loved doing it. I knew I wasn't great at it, but I knew I enjoyed it. So I figured that would lead to something. And, over the past, within 6 months of going from no podcast, I then had Gary Vaynerchuk on episode 39, my first video podcast I ever put out there.
Wow.
It's my first YouTube video to this day. And it's like, oh, I can get in touch with my heroes by doing this. I can get in touch with people who deeply impacted me, but let me just keep doing it. And, that was the end of 2020, and 2021, 22, 23 have all been great. And, now I'm kind of coming to a season of not being sure what the podcast is or what it means to me, but it has served me so well, and I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. What was it like? Firstly, what path were you using to just like knock on the doors of these heroes and get some kind of answer? And what was it in you that was just like, I'm going to do this?
Yeah, I think it was Twitter. Like Twitter, I still to this day is the most effective tool for getting guests from my perspective, because everybody on Twitter, no matter how big the account, is reading their replies in a way that on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube, they might not be. So Twitter was how I got Gary Vaynerchuk on the podcast and how I got Tom Bilyeu on the podcast. And just, it seemed to be a growth engine for me. So I noticed that. And what inside of me was the same thing inside of me that was when I was 15 years old. And I had a Knicks blog at the time, New York Knicks. You might not be familiar, but it's like an NBA team. And I'm writing a blog for them. And within 3 months, I'm interviewing the players because I sent an email to the Knicks PR being like, hey, I'd like to come up to media day. And it's like the same thing inside of me that says, I can do whatever the hell I want. I can go after my dreams. If I think about what I'm good at, if I think about what I enjoy doing, nothing can stop me. I'm not going to play in the NBA, but I like the NBA at 15 years old, so I'm going to write about it, right? So just figuring out what I was good at and figure out that I can't be stopped. That inside of me hasn't changed, and that's been an important piece to the whole thing.
Would you say you've always been a naturally confident person in that sense, or has it been learned?
Yeah, I mean, I've been naturally confident, but I think to the extent that I've grown my own gifts, I've become more confident. So when I'm writing, it's like I've been writing since I was 13 years old or before. I wrote like a newsletter called the Sunny Times when I was 6 or 7 or 8 years old to try to take over the New York Times. Like, this is just in me at a deep level.
Hey man, it might be coming back around. That might be what's coming back. Sunny Times, let's go.
I think so. But to answer your question, I think it's in me.
Yeah.
The confidence.
I think immediately, like the kind of person that's watching this kind of podcast or listening to a show like yours, you're already kind of self-selecting for kind of high agency people, go-getter types. And a lot of people listening might have that dream that is slowly slipping through their fingers, that they just didn't do it for some reason, whether it's the fear of failure or the fear of success or whatever it is. If somebody is listening that just like hears that and is like, heck yeah, I love that for you, but I couldn't do that, or the timing wasn't right for me. What do you say to people these days to just give them the permission and the empowerment that like to embody what you just said, like you can literally do anything?
I think the more you do things that are in line with what you actually desire, the more confidence you have. And the more you disregard what you desire, the more your confidence shrinks. And so I feel when I've lost my confidence, it's because I'm not listening to my desire. And when I'm not listening to my desire, I don't want to show up for myself. I don't have any confidence. And so for me, it starts small with trusting myself. You got to start small with trusting yourself in some way.
How do you fine-tune the instrument of listening to your desire and maybe knowing what is true and what like is more of that, but I want instant gratification or I want cheap dopamine versus like what you really want? I know like meditation has been a big part of your life. Like what are some of the things that really help you keep true to that? Yeah,
meditation has been huge. Journaling and witnessing, what do I write when no one is watching? And then go and read your journal entry from a week ago and 2 weeks ago and a month ago. And if you don't like journal entries, record a voice note and see what is actually on your conscience and see what it is you actually desire. And go back into your photos, or like if you go back into your photos, you see and you can feel the version of yourself you were years ago.
Yeah.
And it's so cool how that happens. And it's like you don't even need a journal entry because you just have a photo and you're instantly back in that memory. And so if you go back into the photos, you see what you once desired and say, like, is this still true? And was this still true a year after? I mean, we live in such a time where we're documenting everything, even if you're a content creator or not. Like you're taking photos. So you have access to your previous states. Use that.
That's really interesting. You reminded me something that I was thinking about the other day. I was looking at my body and my tattoos, and they serve a very similar story. Like I look at those and I remember who I was, where I was, why I got that, what it symbolized for me at the time. And as is the path of change and growth, the things that we want change, the things that we want change, but the beautiful reminders, really beautiful reminders. And I think that lends itself to something that, again, might be something that you've fine-tuned, but seems like it was in you, this like constant curiosity, this seek for growth. One of the things that makes your podcast stand out, I think, and some of the things you've had reflected to you from, again, really respectable big guests is you're really good at what you do. You really understand how to ask questions and hold space. So what is that art form and how did you develop it?
I think if you go back and listen to the first few episodes of the podcast, you'd be like, this guy doesn't know how to do that.
Okay.
And I think by virtue of doing it over and over and over again, does it get developed? And I think the more that I listened to myself, the better I got it. And the more that I understood myself, the better I got at it. And so if you look at a concrete example of like, okay, you have episode 346 with Andy Frisella and you have episode 449 with Mike Posner. What's the difference in those two episodes? To me, the difference is in the first instance, I was looking for a masculine role model and I was trying to show in my questions that Andy Frisella, I wanted his respect. And I wanted him to enjoy what I was doing. And I wanted his approval. The second episode with Mike Posner, that gets removed. And what happens in the difference? The difference is I recognized that I wanted a masculine role model so badly that I was making the podcast guest my masculine role model and thus wanting their approval. So I made that realization. And thus when I make that realization, when the Mike Posner episode happens, I feel less sense of I want Mike Posner to be a masculine role model that needs his approval. I can give that to myself and I recognize that that is my pattern for something I want to do in this type of situation. So the better I got at understanding myself, the better I got as a podcast host and being able to hold space for other people.
Yeah, that's powerful. What changed? You said you became aware of that, aware of like kind of these projections or these patterns or this seeking of approval. What actually changed? What was the light bulb moment and how did it shift what happened inside of your reality?
Yeah, I think a friend pointed it out to me. I know a friend pointed it out to me. Shout out Elle. And she was like, do you notice when these type of guests come on, you're putting them on a pedestal? And I was like, fuck, like she's right. And when I realized she was right, I then sat with myself and said, why is she right? Why am I putting this guest on a pedestal? Why did I put that guest on a pedestal? Why am I not showing up as the truthful, most authentic, realist version of myself because I want their approval? And the answer is because I wanted my dad to be that. And my dad was an amazing role model for what it is, like amazing. And I still found a way for him to lack something, for me to wish and get his approval that he wouldn't give me. So I think it was her pointing it out to me and me, instead of being like, no, I don't do that. I don't think that's true. Be like, okay, in what ways is that true? And if I sat with what ways is that true, be like, she's right. And if I said she's right, okay, what does that mean about my behavior going forward and how I will show up in a masculine, if there is a masculine version of a person I'd like to be or respect, how can I not want their respect or need their respect for me to be okay if we're on a podcast?
And how do you cultivate that?
I think I cultivated it by internally being the person who is capable of looking at my own thoughts. And the reason why Elle came into my life is because she was a mirror of me. She was also wanting to look at her own thoughts. She was also wanting to grow. And when that happens, when you have two people who want to grow, you have a truthful dynamic and a truthful relationship in a way most people wouldn't say that to a friend because most people would be scared of hurting the friend's feelings. But she wasn't scared of hurting my feelings because she knows that I hurt my own feelings all the time to help me grow into a stronger version. And I think that's how you cultivate it. That to come into your life, find a friend like that. How do you find a friend like that? Become that person yourself.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You kind of become like a black hole for positivity, like pulling those people in. It reminds me of a quote from Anthony DeMello. He said the chances of you waking up are proportional to the amount of truth you can face without turning away. And I think, when Elle reflected that truth, you could have turned away. You could have been like, get out of here. What are you talking about? Or you can be like, oh, why did that like tickle me in the solar plexus a little bit? Because she poked at something that is true. And I feel like that because I've had a pretty interesting journey with meditation myself. I've been meditating for probably 6 years, and it was profound, really, really profound. And I think that is something that is often maybe not only afforded, there are many paths, but it's one of the most potent ways to afford yourself that gift, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've spent so much time just sitting with myself and just being with what is, because I've found that consistently my life changes in proportion to the amount of time that I spend meditating, meaning my life changes in the direction that is truthful to my actual desires. And some moments happen where I will be doing things that are not in alignment with my desires, and I'm meditating a lot, and I'm like, wait, how come I couldn't see that at that moment? And then I start to doubt whether meditation works or not. And I'm like, how could I not see the thing that I was doing was not good for me, and I was meditating at that time? And what I've come to realize is like, okay, well, you're not going to have all the information. Meditation's not going to give you perfect information of every situation, every moment,
right,
and give you a godlike view.
Yeah.
I think that's sometimes what I want it to do for me. But the truth is, it gives me more grace with myself when I mess up and go down a path that I don't want to go down.
Yeah. The grace is very important. Like the humility to acknowledge, all right, we are human. We're going to mess up, whatever that means. But to kind of hold ourselves to a high level of accountability and a standard to not allow ourselves to participate in those destructive cycles once we do see them. And I think that's the trick. And if you're doing that, unfortunately / fortunately, there is no growth in comfort. There's no comfort in growth. You end up in positions like where we bring ourselves up to speed where you're currently at, which is podcast was great. It is great. I'm really good at it. And because I'm growing and things are changing and I'm questioning what do I really want, and I'm not even sure whether that's the path I want to go now. So how, the blessing and the curse of self-development and growth is that, things do change. And that sometimes means leaving the known, comfortable place. And everybody else is like, Danny, what are you talking about? Potentially not doing more, but you're really good at this. So like, where are you at currently? What's the temperature check on that and kind of what's emerging in that space?
I was listening on the way over here to your podcast with David Sutcliffe.
Yeah, right on.
And he was talking about him being in Hollywood and how everyone was saying, stay in Hollywood. And he's like, no, I just want to do this therapy stuff.
Yeah.
And not that podcasting is Hollywood or that I've made it in podcasting or anything, but I just feel like there's a comparison there that hit me of like, I did this thing to get good at it, to get any guest I wanted basically on the podcast. And I realize and see that it's not the path for me and it doesn't really make sense. I mean, I wouldn't say it's not the path for me. I'd just say it's not the main focus as much anymore because I've seen the power of other modalities and other ways of being. And I had to really sit with, okay, why am I doing the podcast? I'm doing the podcast because I want to learn from other people. And I'm also doing the podcast because I really want to transform people into the highest versions of themselves. That's always stayed true. And is the podcast the best avenue for me to focus on to help transform people to the highest versions of themselves? Well, I previously thought that was true. And then I started coaching in January of 2024. And I was like, wow, this is different. Like I was somebody who looked at coaches and was like, these people are scamming people or like, this doesn't make any sense. Why are you hiring a coach? You don't need a coach. This is how I grew up. And that was my thought process of judging coaches. And then I started to do it and I was like, well, I started to do it because people started coming to me and asking me difficult things in their life that I'd never dealt with. And I was giving them advice that was transforming their life and actually helping them. And it wasn't just once, it wasn't just twice, it wasn't just 3 times. It was consistent for weeks. And I was like, all right, I get it. I can see it enough times for me to see the sign. And I started coaching and I started seeing people transform. And I was like, oh, this is really helping people get to their highest version. Okay, now what happens if I take this coaching and I do it in 2 days or 3 days? That's a retreat. So I did that once and I was like, oh my God, this is even deeper than coaching. And so I've kind of just followed the path of what it feels like I'm supposed to do. And it's led me to have this focus right now of coaching and retreats. And I don't know what it'll be in a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, but it will be focused. I'm almost positive on helping people achieve or feel the highest versions of themselves for themselves.
Love it. Yeah. And I think that I can make this assumption because I've spent so long coaching too and hosted retreats too, that what's really beautiful about it is I call it two-way medicine. So as you're serving and like you're seeing these people have breakthroughs, it's like healing you too.
Yeah.
And there's something remarkably powerful about coaching in the sense that it almost asks of you, requires of you, if you will, if you want to be a person that lives in integrity, to be the kind of person that deserves to hold that position of telling people what to do or offering them insights, because otherwise you might be able to give great, oh yeah, we close the laptop, and then you're like, man, I feel like a piece of shit because I'm not being that guy. So it helps me really hold that tension of like, be the kind of coach that people think you are, be the kind of man that people think you are. And I think that's really powerful. And I think it gives you something to anchor to and hold on to in tough times to like really show up. And the fact that you just repeat so much of this stuff, you start to like unavoidably not be able to get away from it. And you kind of end up in this thing like, I'm a lot of the time too, I'm coaching what I need to learn and what I need to teach deeper. Has that been an experience for you as well?
Yeah. If you start noticing the advice that people give you is often the advice they need to take themselves. And I've realized and lean more into questions and asking questions. And thankfully, that's a skill that I've developed over 400 plus episodes of a podcast of like, how do you ask the question that's going to help provide the insight for the person? Because in that way, it's coming from less of a bias or a filter. It's coming more from what is this person actually need? This person knows the answer themselves. They just need to be guided in a certain way to hear themselves say that thing.
Yeah. I think something that's really important here is that's not just valuable for coaches or podcasters, it's valuable for life.
Yeah.
So you said you got really good at this. What are the qualities or what are some of the frames, mental models, however you want to phrase it, to be the person that can ask high value questions?
I think, where are you leading someone? And for me, I'm always leading someone to love. And if I really sit with the questions that hit the most, the questions that make the most sense, the questions, it's like, this person is getting a deeper connection, love for themselves and for the world around them. And so I'm constantly using the mental model of how can I guide this person to love? How can I guide myself more to love? What does that look like? And I mean, if you take that as the North Star, that can filter down in so many different ways, but that's...
Is it going to take you generally in the right direction? Though,
yes.
Right? You can't lead with love and stumble too far off the path. It might, you might not be the path that you thought it was going to be, but if you're following that as your North Star, I think you're onto something there. Now you've channeled more of these retreats to be male specific at this point.
Yeah.
What, and you remind yourself, as am I, what do you think like young men are struggling with the most in the modern age? Like, what do you see a lot of coming to you for coaching or in retreats? What's a common emerging theme?
I think telling the truth. Men struggle the most with telling the truth about their current situation, about the ways in which they are failing themselves in absolving responsibility. I think those are some of the most prevalent themes, whether or not they know they're doing that or not, whether or not I knew I was doing that or not. It's like kind of a moot point. That's the core truth of what's happening. It's like, I don't want to tell the truth. I don't want to have responsibility for this. I don't want to actually take care of my body. I don't want to actually take care of my mind. I don't want to actually learn about what it takes to care for a woman. These are the things that are running, I think, in the background for most men. And I think those problems persist.
What would you say is the uncomfortable truth when a person fails to tell the truth?
Having a person there who is going to hold you with love while you are lying to yourself is really important. We lie all the time. And are there going to be people there who hear you and who empathize and understand where you're coming from and are not trying to make you wrong for lying? Is really important, because it's so easy when you see someone lying to be like, they're obviously lying. Like, they're not as strong as they think they are. They're not as smart as they think they are. They're not And okay, and then the person receiving that, can they sit there and be like, they're not, and can I hold them in that?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the uncomfortable thing when people are lying, that they need to hear on the other side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think it's a good coaching thing as well, like to hold the person in that love again, like you said, which is to hold them in their highest potential, knowing that they might not be there right now. They might be lying to themselves right now. They might be unaware that they're lying to themselves right now. And if we have to have the uncomfortable conversation where we lovingly call them in, that we do it from that place of love. It's not that accusatory, like, hey, cut the bullshit, bro. Sometimes, that can hit, and sometimes we maybe treat ourselves like that. But ultimately, as long as, again, it's coming from a place of love, like, hey, yeah, cut the bullshit because I know you can be more. And borrow my belief until it becomes yours. How do you call yourself out on speaking the truth, living the truth, being the truth?
I have so many amazing friends. Like Elle, I mentioned before, but like Brad and Harry, Matt Choi, Talia. Like, I have the best people around me, and they're just, they hold me to a standard for myself that is sometimes higher than I hold for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has been the most tremendous thing for my growth. And in a world where most people don't say they have a close friend, I don't know the stats on it, but it's remarkable how few people, right, are actually friends and connected. I have the best friends in the world. And I have the best friends in the world because I showed up for myself time and time again. I showed up for myself on the podcast when I didn't have any close friends that I could connect to on a deep level. I just put out on Twitter, who wants to talk on the phone? And then did that over and over and over and over again, to the point I showed up for myself so many times in a row that people knew that I could show up for myself. Thus, I was dependable. Thus, I want to be your friend. Right?
Yep.
Those people don't want to be my friend because I've had on amazing podcast guests. They want to be my friend because I showed up for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've shown that I can do that. And so that's what we all have, the power to show up for ourselves. And that's what people want to be friends with, people who show up for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's just something very real about it, right? And everybody's craving real authenticity. And the best way of expressing authenticity is to show up for yourself and, do the thing that only you could do. Right? There's nobody else that could do the Danny Miranda podcast like Danny Miranda could do it. Right. Now, other people can be really good at what they do, but you can only be the second best Joe Rogan in the world, but you can be the best version of you. And I think that that's something that's very important to lean into. And when you do lean into that, you start to attract those kinds of people. Because one of the things, you said I've got really good friends. And I think a lot of people, when they're on a self-growth journey, they kind of go through a lonely chapter, if you will, where they start to maybe outgrow some of their old friends. They realize that maybe they weren't that good friends. They're acquaintances. They love the boys and they're loyal to them and all of that stuff. But it's like, man, at this point, we're just kind of doing this. And then in that desert, if you will, there's this loneliness chapter. What advice would you give to people that are currently feeling like they're in that chapter? How would they go about trying to call in the right people? What are some of the tips you'd give somebody to try and call in the right kind of friends that are going to hold them to that standard for themselves?
Yeah, it's interesting to reverse engineer because I never actually set out to have amazing friends. I never put that on a vision board or anything, which is interesting because that is the thing that gives so much fulfillment to life.
Right.
But if I were to reverse engineer, I would say, how can you be okay with being lonely? How can you be okay with being alone, right? There's loneliness and there's being alone.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two different things, lonely versus being alone. And I was always comfortable and still am comfortable being alone, being by myself, because I enjoy my own company. And if you start to enjoy your own company, then other people start to enjoy your company too. So the question becomes, how can you enjoy your own company?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What are ways in which you would enjoy doing the thing that you're doing? I like running. I like lifting weights. I like reading. I like meditating. Those are things that I enjoy doing. You might not like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I was actually giving this advice to one of my coaching clients where I was like, okay, tell me about your ideal friend. And he's like, someone who's spontaneous and somebody who laughs a lot. It's like, okay, great. Then stop meditating and stop working out so hard if you want a spontaneous friend who laughs a lot,
mm-hmm.
right? The advice isn't necessarily to do the things that you know you should do because you saw them on Instagram. The advice is do the thing that you enjoy. Because if you like laughing a lot and you like being spontaneous, go to the Grand Canyon right now. You're going to find other people who also enjoy going to the Grand Canyon. And then you want to be funny or laugh a lot. If that's really important to you, go to a comedy show or go to a comedy class or start learning how to be funnier within yourself and get so funny that you can make yourself laugh. That's the advice. The advice isn't to just do the thing that is so obvious, that the 75 Hard program. It's like, I love the 75 Hard program. I'm on it right now, but it's not necessarily going to be for everyone.
Yeah. It reminds me of the law of reciprocity. Basically, if you want more love, give more love. It's funny. It seems almost too simple, but you've got to become the kind of person worthy of attracting that. And that starts with you. And I think that example that you had, tell me about your ideal friend, is an interesting romantic example too. Tell me about your ideal romantic partner, because I'll do this with people and they'll say, they're this kind of person, whatever, insert, adventurous, funny. And then the reflection is, how much of that are you doing? How are you being that person? They're like, oh, well, not really. And you can see what happens is they're looking for this complementary opposite that's going to complete them. When in reality, we want to share our lives with a partner that definitely shares our vision and they're complementary to us. But that could lead to some sticky circumstances of codependency, right? Like if I'm saying I want this person to complete me or fill my holes and I'm not willing to fill my holes myself, then it can get into interesting territory.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I remember talking to a friend on the phone and I was reading to him the list of what I wanted in a partner. And what he said to me was, dude, you want a version of yourself? And I was like, that's such a compliment because it means that I'm doing the things that I want from someone else.
Yeah.
So I thought that was such an interesting, you don't often hear that. Someone wants the version of themselves that they are actually doing.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, that's a good thing.
That'll be a good thing. Yeah, that'll be alignment. And I think, there's different aphorisms like opposites attract and things like that. And maybe that's more, from a fun, spontaneous, like lustful energy. But when you're thinking about life partner, I think fundamentally you have to kind of see the world somewhat similar. You have to have shared values and a shared identity map somewhat. You don't want a complete replica of yourself, because you probably drive yourself crazy. Because I know you've spent a lot of time alone with yourself and you're like, who is this guy in my head? He's crazy. So, but something like largely in sync with what you're searching for is really important. So I think, that reflection of be the kind of person you're looking to hang around with, like embody those traits and where possible, also put yourself in those arenas. Like you've heard of the fifth monkey effect, I'm sure. Like if you hang around with 5 smokers, you become the 6th kind of thing. Well, if you want to hang around with people that are thinking growth minded, like, well, ask yourself the question, where are those people? Can I be that kind of person? And then can I put myself around those people? Because I'm going to absorb those values. So that might be joining the group that's doing 75 hard, the running club, the CrossFit gym, the yoga gym, the library, whatever. One of the things that's very interesting about that is Austin as a melting pot for it. What's going on in Austin? Why has it become such, why is it like this suck that's pulling all of these growth-minded people in? What's special about it?
I think what I've noticed is that people who come to Austin prioritize happiness over any other place, and that I've been to in the United States. And I think if you have people who are prioritizing happiness, you're going to have them go to similar activities, similar values, similar ways of being. And I mean, I remember visiting Austin and being like, I've never been to any place like this where everyone is so happy and wants to strive towards growth. And then I visited again and I was like, wait, it's still like that. And then again, and I was like, oh my God, this is just the place. I got to move here. I don't want to move here, but I have to. And so what is it about it? I think you have Rogan and you have Tim Ferriss and you have people who create the magnet for it. And then there are people who are understanding of the life that those people are living and be like, that seems pretty cool. And I'd like to make my way to do something similar with my life. So I think that's what has happened.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? Like somebody's got to forge the path, and then other people are like, I want a bit of that. And then if that happens hundreds of times and then thousands of times, it naturally becomes a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy that not everybody in Austin's going to be happy. Not everybody's going to be, a super successful entrepreneur, but you've got an interesting pool of a disproportionate amount of those kinds of people. And then if you're willing to do what you've done seemingly since you were 6 years old, which is take a bit of a risk, gamble on yourself, put yourself in social situations where maybe you don't belong and just be like, actually, no, everybody belongs anywhere they want to be. Then I can mingle with these people and that will rub off on me. So I think that's really profound. But I want to focus on this thing that you said about pursuing happiness, like the pursuit of happiness. What makes you happy and what are you pursuing?
What makes me happy is doing the things that I say I'm going to do and fulfilling the things that I deeply desire. What makes me happy is helping other people realize that what makes them happy and helping them fulfill their own desires. What makes me happy is lighting people up and making people feel good. And there's so many things that make me happy. And if you have a pool of 100 things that make you happy or could make you happy, it's like, how many of those am I checking off every single day? Working out makes me feel happy. Drinking water makes me feel happy. Reading and growing and learning makes me feel happy. Having a good conversation makes me feel happy. Being seen and heard and listened to and seeing and hearing and listening to someone else makes me feel like, so I think it's an infinite question, but just aligning with my heart, right? Aligning with what is true to my heart in any given moment and letting that unfold. That's what makes me happy. What makes you happy?
A lot of overlap.
Yeah.
A lot of what you just said. It's the twinkle in somebody's eye after a special conversation. It's my family. It's my kids. It's the warmth of the sun on my face. It's when I actually do fully step into gratitude instead of having it be a productivity task because Andrew Huberman said it was good for my dopamine system. But it's like, no, actually, like, let me feel how grateful I am to be alive. Like, those are the moments I'm happy. It's travel, it's adventure. It's the things that fundamentally pull me into a sense of growth and challenge in a way. Like, I love challenge too. I love getting after it in the gym. That makes me happy. Not in the moment necessarily. I'm like, oh my goodness, 4 more minutes of this. Ugh. But afterwards, I'm like, I'm proud of you, man. So I think a lot of that too. And yeah, it's been a journey for me to try and live more from that North Star of the heart and really following that stuff. And, an interesting question then is, if we order happiness as kind of like one of our North Stars to pursue that, what happens when we don't feel happy? What happens when we're going through something? What happens when we're in the suck a little bit? How do you navigate those, being a person that wants to look for happiness and find many moments of joy, but also acknowledging the human experience isn't always going to be that?
Yeah, I think it starts with acknowledging it and not resisting what is, and having friends and people there and support system that you've built when you've been feeling happy that is there for you and can understand and guide you to being happy or in the vortex or feeling love or feeling joy. And so what happens is, I think it starts small. When your world gets rocked, you just got to start small. You just got to start in the basic, smallest thing that you can commit to every day for yourself that you believe is good for you. And when you're ready to get out of it, when you're ready to start feeling whole again. And that could be as simple as doing a journal entry every day. That could be as simple as meditating every day. That could be as simple as recording a video of yourself. Like, you can choose it, but it's got to be small, because when you're in that suck, if it's deep despair, you don't want to get out. There's something you're getting from being in that place. So you got to start small with proving to yourself that you can fulfill your obligations. You can do what you say you're going to do. Your word can be your wand. And from there, I think building on it as you see fit. Okay, so you go from meditating every day to now you're working out every day. To now you're meditating and working out every day. Now you're meditating and working out every day. Now you're meditating, working out every day, and doing a podcast every day. Like, this can get big real quick if you commit to daily actions and if you start small.
It's momentum, right? Yeah. I often think, I can't remember where I heard it, but momentum eats motivation for breakfast. And I was like, ooh, because sometimes you're not going to feel motivated, but if you focus on the thing that you can do that's small enough that you can just kind of drag your butt and do it and generate the momentum, you're on the front foot. And that's very different energy than being on the back foot and being like, I can't do anything. I don't want to do anything. It sucks. Like momentum. And then that momentum becomes exactly what you just said. It starts to roll. It starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then, life might throw you another curveball 6 months down the line and you're going to go to zero again. So you think about momentum and you just start again. And you need tools along the way. You need those friends. You need those mentors. You potentially even need structure, like something like 75 Hard. I wanted to talk to you about that because not only did you interview Andy Frisella, the founder of that program, I believe this is your second time running through the program. So talk to me about the value in something like what 75 offers you.
Yeah, I've done it 3 times and I've tried it 6 or 7 times. And the difference between the times that I've succeeded and the times I've failed is that the times that I've succeeded, I've said to myself, I'm either going to die or finish this program. And it's kind of reshifted what is needed for me for success. Maybe not for everyone, but I know for me, I need to have that declaration of like, this is going to happen or else. What the program gives me is a sense of structure, which you mentioned, and a feeling of accomplishment and a knowing that doing something difficult every day is actually making me so much better. And it's so obvious and it's like the things that everyone knows they should do, the things that I know I should do that I don't do every day, or give myself an excuse for why I don't need to do it. When I do those things, when I don't eat junk food, when I'm actually doing 2 workouts a day, when I'm actually drinking a gallon of water, it's like, oh, life is great. It's like, it's not that hard, but it's hard in the moment when you don't want to do it.
Yeah, exactly, man. Yeah. It's simple is what it is, but simple isn't always easy, right? And it almost feels sometimes, I get what you're saying. I totally know that feeling. But like some people have a hard time squaring this circle of, wait, Danny said he wants to be happy. And then he's talking about like working out twice a day and no junk food, but junk food makes me happy and ice cream makes me happy and being lazy makes me happy. And it kind of like, well, does it? So it's just so interesting how it's in the hard right thing that is the thing that a lot of the time you don't really want to do, but you're delaying gratification. You are not stealing today's happiness, by these little micro moments of cheap pleasure or whatever. So I just think that's an interesting thing for people to understand, that some of the things that are going to make you the most happy aren't always just like joy and instant gratification in the now.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's like, I think everything has a time and place. Like I partied like nobody's business in college and from 18 to 23. And I'm so grateful for that. And if I was trying to do 75 hard in college, I would have been like, would I have been a better person? Yes. But did those moments also serve me? And so I hear what you're saying. And I also think that there are moments of instant gratification that are awesome.
Yeah, for sure, man. For sure. Yeah, life isn't just this, sardonic sufferfest, right? This is where like, I've got the Goggins in me. I've got the Jocko in me, and I love that stuff. But I've also got this like, I want to be in love and hug a tree and sit down in the forest and meditate forever. So it's like this balance of the Buddha and the beast, if you will. And I think maybe something that's missed sometimes in the go harder, discipline harder bro community is that, yes, discipline is incredibly valuable. And something like 75 Hard will teach you an awful lot about discipline and control and delayed gratification. And it's cool. It's a cool skill to develop. But isn't it much cooler to not need discipline in the first place because you love what you do? Like that's the cheat code. That's like running downhill as opposed to running uphill.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about doing 75 Hard is that eventually you start loving
right.
doing 2 workouts a day. You start loving. And so it's funny that the thing that you might not love at one point becomes the thing you love just by virtue of doing it a lot.
Yeah.
Which makes me think about, when we are bonded with a friend or a romantic partner, it's like often just we are spending so much time with that person that you can love so much if you spend time with it. And the things you spend time with, you start to love if you are a specific type of person. And so I find that interesting that we will find love for a lot of things based on the amount of time we spend with it.
would you say that describes your journey with running? I know that's become something you love now, and the run club and such. What's the journey been like with that?
Yeah, I would say that my grandpa ran marathons his whole life, triathlons, and it always felt like something that was inside of me or I was capable to do because of my mind of just committing to things daily and having a structure and having a routine and disciplining myself. So I knew it was in me. My grandpa was doing 60, 70 miles a week in 1970, 1980. So
Gangster.
yeah, just like absolute beast. And he had a run club himself. He would just show up to a park. Cool. So I see these things in my blood when I'm growing up, and I'm saying to myself, oh, like, I'm sure there's going to come a day when I'll run marathons. There's going to come a day when I'll spend a lot of time running. And I've just started to devote myself to it and found so much fun doing it. And it's been a place where I can go into the mind and plan things out. And I love it. I started lifting when I was maybe 21, 22, and that's always been a huge part of my life. But then with running, it's a different part of your mind, and both are great. And 75 Hard gives me the ability to do both, which is exciting. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about the run club aspect and how you've kind of brought people together with what you're doing there.
Yeah, so that was your question. And Brett and Harry actually started the run club from Meat Mafia, as we've been talking about a lot. And they started this particular Tuesday morning run club. And at some point they had another run club that they wanted to host or be a part of. So they switched to that, but they had people who would show up to Tuesdays, and they asked if I could come in as the host of it. And it's been such a fun journey to host something 7 a.m. in Austin every Tuesday morning. And it's like, wow, this is an amazing way just to bring men together to help men grow. What we do is we do a 4-mile run. We do a 15-minute meditation, and then we go to grab coffee. And it's like primal. You run with 20, 30, 40 men. You're in a pack. It's like, oh, this is what we're supposed to do. Like, and where else do you get that opportunity as a man over 22? It's like, it's a rare thing in today's modern world to just be part of a group with other men, just men.
Yes.
So I enjoy it. I love it. And it's a key part of my community and my way of being that gives me a lot of joy.
Yeah, and I think there's a very interesting insight there as well in the sense that men seem to bond a lot quicker over a shared struggle, like or a task or accomplishment.
Yeah.
I was a summer camp counselor for a long time, and I used to just like run these little experiments as I'm watching the kids on opening day, and they don't know each other or it's orientation, the staff. And if there's a group of guys and it's kind of awkward because nobody knows, all you've got to do is throw a ball in the middle, and the chimps will pick it up and they'll throw it around. Then a game will ensue, and then afterwards they're all like bros, because they bond over something. I've done jiu-jitsu for a long time and CrossFit too, and there's something different about those relationships when they form in the fires of struggle. Like in jiu-jitsu in particular, like some of these guys, Cade back here, we'll try and rip each other's heads off for 25 minutes, and then it brings you closer together, even though you were just trying to kill each other, essentially. So it's just so interesting how men bond like that. And it's funny that it seems to be that men need to do first and then bond, and girls almost need to kind of bond and communicate first to build the trust to then do. So it's just really, really interesting dynamics there. And I think, you've got to, if not you, who? So you create it, or you go to it, and you got to find these places where you live, especially if you're feeling again like you're in this loneliness chapter. Like, go find the places where men are, bonding over a shared struggle or a shared physical task, because that's usually where some good characters are going to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable how just someone showing up for themselves at 7 a.m. week after week after week makes you just have so much respect for them. Of like, oh, this is the type of person who is showing up for themselves, and this is the type of person who wants to run and meditate and learn and grow. And I mean, it's so simple, but there are so many moments when you don't want to show up for yourself. And if you're listening to this podcast right now and you don't want to show up for yourself, I get it, and just hold yourself with some compassion in that and see if you can do the small step.
Yeah, absolutely. Man.
Because when you're in that state, you don't want to go to a group, you don't,
you want to hide.
You want to hide.
Yeah.
And I get it.
Yeah,
I get it completely.
And maybe when you want to hide, the most courageous thing you can do is be seen.
Yes.
And that's another thing. You said you use that word primal. Like if there's something primal that's in men, it's this call to courage to just do Do what you know deep down feels right, even if it means risking it all, even if it feels like death psychologically. Like, I couldn't possibly do that. You know, public speaking or something. Oh, I would love to do it, but I couldn't possibly do that. Like, you've got to do the thing that brings you right to your edge sometimes. And I know it's hard, but you got to find it, you know?
It is death. It's the death of the version of you who is not capable of doing that thing. And that's why it feels so scary. Because the version of you who could not write a book is about to die. The version of you who could not do a podcast is going to die. The version of you who couldn't do a marathon is about to die. And you want to hold on to that because that feels comfortable. But if you want to die, you have to have the courage to live fully.
Your new life requires the death of your old one.
That's right.
It's a really powerful quote. It's scary because we say the D word and people are like, I want to die. And we hide it. You know, in our culture, we hide it. We don't treat death as the sacred act of the grand graduation ceremony that we all go through.
Yeah.
We all have these unique human experiences, but there's a couple of very potent shared things. We are born and we die.
Yeah.
We all take a first breath. We all take a last one. And we don't want to acknowledge like the final death. And because we don't want to see capital D death, we don't want to have these micro deaths along the way. Our ego, our lower self, whatever you want to call it, just fights it and resists it. And I think rejigging your relationship to what death is, whether that's through the Stoic practice of memento mori, that, you know, they meditate on the idea that you're going to die, not in a morbid way, but to remind them that, hey, if you're going to die and life is so sacred, it reminds you to live well. And what's required then is to almost like die unto yourself every day in order to become like the phoenix, you know, that dies in the ashes and then rises again. What are some of the bigger deaths that you've had to go through? Or what are some of the deaths that you're currently going through? What needs to die in Danny so the new life version of him can continue to be reborn?
Yeah. I would say right now, the death that I'm going through is the death of avoiding responsibility in any way. Any way that responsibility is something that I can skirt around is now something that I have to face head on. And I've recently become aware of that, and it's cool. It's a cool journey, and it is something that I'm really looking forward to, because I know when I took responsibility for my body, life becomes better. When I take responsibility for running or the podcast, life becomes better. So I'm really looking forward to taking responsibility for every aspect of my life, because I know what I want. What I want is a family, and I think that responsibility in every aspect of my life is what is required.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, when you started talking about responsibility, the thing that jumps out in me is fatherhood, you know? Talk about something grabbing you by the short and curlies and making you grow up real quick. You know, that'll force you to get responsible. And you know what? In some cases, it won't. And that's the tragedy of like absent fathers, you know, that they can't hold that responsibility. It's like pressure can shatter glass, or it can make diamonds. And it depends on the willingness of the person to hold that responsibility. And I know for me, and I'm very grateful for the challenges, the trials, the tribulations, the mentors, the friends that I've had along the way, that thankfully I was able to rise to the challenge and hold that responsibility in a way that it feels like it's squeezing me into more of a diamond. And it's not easy. But man, like you said, I think that life gets meaningful in direct proportion to the amount of responsibility you're willing to hold.
That's a great quote.
Yeah, it's something like a Jordan Petersonism, but we're calling it a Steelaneism.
I like it.
Yeah, but you're right, man. I think responsibility is meaning, you know? So it's also interesting, right, that you said, well, I knew that when I took responsibility for my body, it improved. When I took responsibility for this, and yet there is still an area where I'm avoiding responsibility. Right. It's like that new levels, new devils kind of thing.
Yeah, right? And it's easier.
Yeah, it's easier.
Or
is it? Because
it's easier
now.
Short term. Yeah.
What does it cost you in the long run is the question.
That's right.
Yeah. Is the goal, as you think about all of this stuff and change, I know you've spoken in the past about a big, audacious goal one day is to sell out Madison Square Garden. Is that still a goal?
No, I've let that one go. And I've let it go because in my head, it is the focus on myself or the guests or the podcast, with people looking up at that. And maybe I'll sell at Madison Square Garden, but have everyone who's attending up on the stage and I'll be learning from them.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I don't have that as a goal anymore. But yeah, it definitely served me at some point, and I wouldn't put it past me for that to occur in this reality without trying for it to occur.
Well, it's funny how that goes sometimes, right? I've got all these quotes and aphorisms, but life withholds what you want until you no longer need it. And it's kind of like, maybe I needed that for some sense of this validation again. And now I've released the need over it. It might just happen to be the fact that a few years down the line, it's like, oh, this is happening way more organically. Because it might still be there. It might still be in the psyche. But it's just that more grounded confidence that seems to be coming from yourself instead of this need to just like be the man on the stage because like, look how good I am. And it's now more about bringing people together and, oh, I can use those gifts to cultivate like a really healing atmosphere with value. But it's not just, oh, I did it and I'm so cool.
Yeah. That definitely resonates. And I'm interested to see what's going to unfold in this, journey of healing and helping and growing other people, because it's new for me, right? I feel like I've been doing it all my life, but it's something I'm just really stepping into in the past 6 months in a more formal capacity. So gonna see how that unfolds and manifests.
Yeah. What do you kind of keep at the forefront of your mind as you enter into this like new chapter, this new season with some of the surprises to just keep you ready and able to adapt and be flexible with what comes up?
God.
Tell me more.
I've never believed in God all my life. I grew up atheist or just unknown but I started to pray. I don't remember exactly when, but sometime in the last 6 months or 9 months. And it was close and similar to the time when I started to clear out a lot of the patterns and resentments I had against my parents, resentments I had against the world, any bit of, I just looked at so much of my psyche that what popped up when there was nothing there was just this belief, this knowing, this feeling, this connection with God. And that's been a tremendous journey. So that's what I'm keeping at the forefront of my mind when I'm going on this journey, is like, God, lead the way. Show me the path. Show me create the divine plan and just let me follow it.
Yeah. If God is leading the way, why doubt the path? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, because the human comes in, the mind comes in. Oh, does it have to be this way? Does it have to be this hard? What connects you to God? Is it prayer? Is it nature? Is it a daily practice of any kind?
Yeah, meditating every day definitely is a connection to God. I did this practice once that was just like, write on a piece of journal. It's like, God, at the top, put God, show me what I need to know, and then just start writing stream of consciousness. I think that's interesting. I've only done it once. What else? I mean, synchronicities are probably the greatest connector to God. Of like, how in the world does this thing that is so unrelated to that thing happen at that time? What is happening? So I think that those are how I connect with God the most.
I call synchronicities God nods.
Yeah.
That's the God nod.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, cool. Okay, thanks for that one, man. I needed it today.
I
needed
connected.
that one today. Yeah, no, Jung, famous psychologist, used to say synchronicities are when the veil is thin, the veil between the seen and the unseen, the ordinary and the extraordinary world. That when you start to see, because apparently, if you are tuned in enough, synchronicities are all around all the time. And as you start to tune in more, as you start to become a cleaner vessel through so many different factors, like the physical health of the body, how you feed it, how you fuel it, the water that you're drinking, your spiritual alignment, your everything, like truly holistically, that you become a clearer channel of a direct line to God, instead of, having to zigzag around all of this inflammation or this spiritual distortion because we're spending our energies in ways that aren't aligned. So It's no surprise to me that, when people get on this path, because it was a very similar journey for me. I grew up kind of just like angry kind of atheist. Nothing matters, materialist. And as I started to get healthier, I started to believe in a transcendent other. And meditation was profoundly helpful too, because I found the little bits of God inside of me. And it's like, when feeling is believing, man. You don't necessarily need to explain it or have everybody understand it. If you feel it and it's orienting you towards something better, and it allows you to generally stumble in the right direction, then God on.
Absolutely. Yeah. That has been absolutely the same from my own perspective. As I've cleared more and more things, God has appeared and shown. And that has been a remarkable thing to witness. And you just have feel a lot of gratitude for that, for being able to be shown God in so many ways.
Mm-hmm. What do you think's next? What do you anticipate? What's Danny Miranda cooking up?
I'm doing retreats, which I'm really excited about, men's retreats and coaching. And I think trying to be as clear of a vessel as I possibly can every day is what I'm cooking up and what I really want to be doing, whether it's today, a year from now, 10 years from now. How can I be as clean so that I can hear and trust of the intuition that comes into, I should go on that podcast. I should go to the store, this store instead of that one. Like, there's so many little decisions we make every day. And if we can listen to our intuition and actually tap into what the God within us is trying to say, that is what I'm up to next. Because I don't know what I'm up to next. Yep. I don't know what's going to happen, but I just want to listen to the voice as it arises and continue to do that over and over and over again.
Love it. What would you say for yourself are the highest leverage things that you do in order to keep that fine-tuned?
I think it's doing 75 hard and meditating. If I can do those two things, I mean, the most remarkable, craziest stuff happens when I do 75 hard and meditate. It's like all the problems get solved. I mean, one story was when I did this program for the first time in 2019, maybe like 30 days into it, I went to a coffee shop in San Diego. And well, first off, I was sending cold emails to random influencers, people online, just people who I thought I could help create a course. And I got on a phone with one of them. And this is probably 30 days into the program, and we're talking on the phone. It was a great conversation. Probably one of the only people that responded to me. I sent hundreds of cold emails. The next day, I go to a coffee shop in San Diego, and a older woman, makes eye contact with me and is like, "Hey, what's up?" We start talking. Within 15 minutes, she tells me I should go to her church because there was this great speaker there who I would love. The speaker that she said I would love was the guy that I spoke to on the phone the previous day.
No way.
So that would happen, like a situation like that happened maybe once every couple of weeks when I meditate and do 75 hard. And so I don't know, that is what I'm going to do.
I love it.
To make myself a clear vessel.
I love it. Hand it over. I think that's a wonderful way to bring it home, brother. Thank you for sharing everything. Please tell people where they can go to keep up with watching that journey unfold and what you're up to and where the links are and all that stuff.
Sure. So it's Hey Danny Miranda on Twitter and Instagram, and posting videos on YouTube about what I'm up to every day. And yeah, thank you for the great conversation. Definitely filled me with a lot of happiness, and I really appreciate all the work you put into this, because I know how much it takes to be on the other side.
Yeah, you do. You definitely do know that one. So thank you, brother. I appreciate that as well. You lot, we'll see you next week. Thank you very much. Go check out Danny. Peace out. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.